Hi, welcome to this episode. Go on, sir.
No, maybe you could do it.
I don't know what I'd say. Welcome to Off Radar. We're going to talk about Jim Carrey. Let's go. You could do just
Somebody stop me.
That is the intro.
That's the intro. Just
that is perfect. Hello, you are listening to Off Radar. It's a movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at OffRadarPodcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt.
All right. Alrighty then. This is Off Radar. My name is James Smith. I'm joined by Neil Brock.
Hello.
He was thinking of another Jim Carrey ism there, who we call Nige.
Also hello.
And James Eatock.
Hello. Very confused.
And this week is a bit different. So we haven't done this before, so we'll see how it goes. But what we're going to do, every few episodes, we're going to pick an actor or a director or a writer. So if you've got someone that you want to recommend that we have a chat about, a general chat, then write in and let us know. But this week we're going to talk about Jim Carrey. Now, Jim Carrey is one of the biggest, I guess, Hollywood actors that has been about for a long time. He's had a very, very strange career. It started off a long time ago in late 80s, I guess. But his breakthrough film into movies was Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, which when I was researching this, I only realised that he actually wrote as well.
I didn't know that.
As acted in, which, if you look at his writing credits, there's no other film, movie, that he's written. But yeah, Ace Ventura was the film that kind of blasted him into Hollywood, and it made him massive overnight into this comedic rubber face, kind of lovable yet stupid. Some people hated him, I would say, at the time. Some people loved him, but almost like this harmless comedic fool.
Do not go in there. Woo!
He was born in Canada. He spent a lot of his career kind of doing stand-up and, coming through a very comedic route, I would say, doing Saturday Night Live and, those kind of shows.
He was quite the name in Living Colour, was it?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. It was kind of like a comparable to Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It had a lot of the Wayans in, and I think, yeah, some sort of quite big names from that sort of period. And again, that ran from early 90s. I think it's 1990 to 94. And obviously 94 was when Ace Ventura came out. So
yeah.
I don't remember him on... Obviously, I don't think we even got in Living Colour in the UK. Or if we did, it was on
I was going to say, I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah. But it was... he was one of the few white people on that show. But it was really interesting because he was he wasn't I'm the white guy. He was Jim Carrey, the actor, was on par with the other comedians on that show. And if you look on YouTube, he does an amazing. I always remember the parodies. He did one for Vanilla Ice, which is amazing, and another one for Snow. Who did Informer?
Informer.
Oh yeah.
The Informer one is brilliant.
Imposter, I'm just a middle class worker from Toronto. In spite of how I sound, single one platinum bigger than Marley and Jimmy and Yellowman, but I'm not even mulatto. My reggae's watered down. Hear me on the radio, think I could not be blacker, but on my video you see I'm really a cracker, pretending I was a rasta since I was in jammies. I should pay my face and start betting out.
It's so funny, but yeah, he was obviously a very funny actor, but from a comedic background. He wasn't just someone who's I'm going to become an actor. Obviously, he was Ace Ventura happened primarily because of his comedy chops more than his acting chops. But obviously, as we would discover later in his career, his acting chops really became like, oh, this guy can act. He's not the clownish, rubber-faced.
There's my Jim Carrey bingo. Rubberface. Sorry, I've got Jim Carrey bingo, and Rubberface.
I thought Smith had already said it. Sorry, I thought Smith had already done Rubberface.
I just said he was, just Rubberface. But it's funny, before we get to the straight film, I guess, like there were a flurry, weren't there, of those comedic films like The Mask, Dumb and Dumber,
The Cable Guy,
which I guess that kind of hinted at, like, this guy's got a bit more range.
There's something here,
than I gave him credit for. Because before that, like, those films, I get why people like them, but at the end of the day, like they're very like you could watch them at 2 a.m. after a night out, and I wouldn't say they're brilliant films, but
juvenile
the Cable
fun.
Guy. Yeah, exactly, and I get it. I get why people like those, but Cable Guy, there was a more vulnerability to the character.
Oh, by the way, don't worry about Robin. I'll make sure she's well taken care of. If you go near her, I'll kill you.
That's it. Come on, let's go.
You guys had seen like Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, Ace Ventura then?
No. So my first exposure to Jim Carrey was, I'll never forget the first time I saw him was, I was watching Sky Movies back. I was like 94, so I was probably heading off to school that morning, or maybe college. And they used to, Sky Movies early in the morning would show trailers, like, here's the top 10 films in America, and they would show the trailers for these movies. I remember the trailer for Ace Ventura had me cracking up, because there's one scene in it where they've got a fisheye lens, and he's in the tank where the whale was.
Where the dolphin had been stolen.
The dolphin, sorry, yeah. And he's doing like a...
Because it's the Miami Dolphin.
That's right, yeah, the mascot,
yeah.
And he's like, Captain's log, and he's in this whole stuff. But the angle of the camera is a fisheye lens from low down. And he's looking around, and Courtney's like, Courtney Cox is like, Ace, get out of the tank. And I'll never forget, he just walks up to the camera, he's at the camera, and his head is huge. And he's like, I can't do it, Captain. I don't have the power.
Ace, get out of the tank.
I just can't do it, Captain. I don't have the power.
And every time I see that, even thinking about it, I always chuckle to myself. And then I remember going to the cinema a few months. I never saw Ace Ventura at the cinema, actually. I remember seeing the trailer thinking, that's funny. But the first time I saw a Jim Carrey film at the cinema was The Mask, because, and I'm sure you guys remember this, when that was promoted, whether it be trailer or TV spots or whatever, it wasn't the Jim Carrey factor that made that movie so enticing. It was the visuals, because it was like one of the first times you'd seen quality CGI. We're not talking like Jurassic Park quality. It was like they're doing cartoony things and making movements of humans that are cartoonish, but it looks genuine. Like the whole Tex Avery thing where he sees Cameron Diaz again. First time I ever saw Cameron Diaz in a movie. Yeah,
that was her debut, wasn't it?
And but you can tell that the other thing about his casting in The Mask was genius, I thought, because when he's got the green mask on, that's all him doing a lot of the facials and stuff. When it's the extremes, but it worked so perfectly. And as comedic as that film is, he plays, is it Stanley Ipkiss? He plays that role really well. There's a level of gravitas in that.
Look, Ma, I'm roadkill.
But I will confess, never saw Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, wow, yeah. I mean, that was weird. That Dumb and Dumber, like for me, like as a teenager, it was like one me and a few mates would watch like all the time. I kind of like look back at that with fondness, but also annoyance, because there's a scene where they're in the car doing the mark.
Oh.
Yeah, and one of my mates used to do that in my ear all the time when we were 15, and if he hears this, he's going to definitely do it again. But it's so annoying.
Ready, Harry? Mark, yeah. Ing, yeah. Bird, yeah. Mocking.
Obviously, the point in the film, and Dumb and Dumber is like pure silliness and stupidness, and it's it's of that time, it's of that Carrey era, a bit like Liar Liar, like we talk about.
I really like that film.
I think for what it is, I think it is, he's so good in it that, it's a very watchable film. But you talk like the improvisation in The Mask, or like you were saying, at the end of Liar Liar, the best bit is the end credits, where they basically just have him like messing up, but he's just going absolutely bonkers, and he's like, blah, 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 blah. But everybody in there, like the extras, the actors, everyone is just in pieces, and it's like his audience, and it's really interesting to see.
A goose. Including
prenuptial agreements.
Prenuptial agreements.
How about you, Nige? How were you first kind of into Jim Carrey?
First thing I ever saw him in was a film with Gina Davis, Jeff Goldblum, and Marlon Wayans in it. It's called Earth Girls Are Easy.
Was it easy? You saw it?
Wow.
He played one of 3 aliens that have basically come down to Earth, and like they meet Gina Davis, and they, I think Jeff Goldblum's character like falls in love, but Jim Carrey is almost like background alien, just pulling the occasional strange face and doing that kind of thing. And you've already spoken about some of the films he did in like the mid sort of 90s, obviously Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask. Of those films, I've never watched any of them all the way through. Like I've only ever seen bits of all of them, just because whilst it's like super juvenile and like it's obviously for a lot of people it's sort of they grew up watching it, they really enjoy it. I just found it a bit annoying, and like, I even watched like the Mask cartoon that used to be on and stuff like that. I think I saw the Mask cartoon before I ever saw any of the film, really. And it just, none of them ever really interested me that much. And even watching The Cable Guy, which I saw sort of a few years later, probably like early noughties, I found him so annoying in it. And there's something about it, the way he kind of portrays certain characters and his like craziness. And I know that in his personal life, he suffered with depression and kind of sort of manic episodes. And his character is so often transformation from like being, as you kind of said, like in The Mask, it's a literal one from being a normal person to a sort of green-faced, whatever he's supposed to be, crazy person. I just found every single one of his roles, even like the Riddler in Batman Forever, he's just crazy. It's just classic Jim Carrey. So it was only when it got to the late 90s and he did The Truman Show and Man on the Moon that I was like, oh, actually, there's something a bit more to this guy. Maybe I should go back and actually appreciate what he did. And I tried to go back and I thought, well, no, I still don't like them very much. But at least I had this newfound respect for him because he had done 2 very, very strong films.
Well, I think The Truman Show, you know, that film in the 90s, that was the turning point. That not only proved he could act, but, you know,
it's a great film.
Like, it's an excellent film. Like, you know, it's one of my favourite films of the 90s. Like, you know, it's one of those films you can watch over and over again, but it's not only a great film, but his performance in it was just so stunning. Good. It was, you know, the comedy in it was still there, but it was understated, which is so bizarre to say that about a guy who had just done a load of films, you know. So whoever cast him and trusted that this guy can act, you know, it's genius.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new Mococo drink? All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mountain Nicaragua, no artificial sweeteners.
What the hell are you talking about?
Who are you talking to?
I've tasted other cocos. This is the best.
What the hell does this have to do with anything? Tell me what's happening!
Well, you're having a nervous breakdown. That's what's happening.
You're part of this, aren't you?
There's plenty more films that followed, like you said, Man on the Moon, and then, you know, one of my favourite films ever made, and probably you guys both love it as well, was Eternal Sunshine, which came a few years later, which was, you know, like the Truman Show was kind of like, I wouldn't say that straight, but it was straight, and then Eternal Sunshine was like a different level.
Go back to listen to one of our previous pods where we speak about Eternal Sunshine. I think it was in it must have been in the Naughties top 5. So yeah, we speak about it for quite a bit, and it's to cut a long story short, we all love this film.
Well, I mean, during those early noughties, you had like Man on the Moon, Eternal Sunshine, number 23, which I saw at the cinema.
Oh, yeah.
That was bizarre. Like,
that was like a thriller horror kind of.
Yeah. But I went
it was like Stir of Echoes, wasn't it? That kind of thing.
I don't know. I haven't seen Stir of Echoes, but my friend and I went to the cinema going, oh, Jim Carrey film. Let's give it a watch. Like, I seem to remember us enjoying it. I don't remember much about it, but I seem to remember us enjoying it at the time. But it's so weird to think that was a like you say, a thriller, horror, Jim Carrey film. But it was marketed as almost like a Jim Carrey film. So you're like, oh, it's going to be light-hearted comedy. It's like, oh no, this is deathly serious. But Man on the Moon, obviously, again, like Truman Show was the turning point, like we said. Man on the Moon is its own film. Again, it's the Truman Show, Man on the Moon, Eternal Sunshine are films that you would get like if you were to go back to the start of Jim Carrey's career, let's say with Ace Ventura, and said, oh, there's these three films in the future, and Jim Carrey's going to be the lead serious actor. You'd be like, no, he won't. Like, this is the rubber face guy.
Yeah.
And yet he's in those roles. And I would say, Man on the Moon, he obviously, we've all seen
he lived as Andy Kaufman, didn't he?
Yeah,
he took it to that kind of
absurd.
Yeah, lived as him. Is it who's the perfect character? Daniel Day-Lewis style. He basically became
Method Man. Yeah, a Method Man. Method acting. Yeah, there's. I think myself and Etok have seen this. I don't think you hadn't last time we spoke, but on Man on the Moon, there's a documentary called Jim and Andy: The Great Beyond, which is basically. Like Man on the Moon, I've got to say, like his performance in that film is stunning. I didn't actually know much more than, apart from the method acting. But the film as a whole, I thought was okay.
Man, that's harsh.
Yeah.
Sorry, had to jump in there and defend it, but yeah, carry on.
Fair enough. But I think because like watching Jim and Andy, I think maybe if I watch it again now, I'd really appreciate it, because basically what it is, it's like they film, like documentary behind the scenes stuff of Jim Carrey actually becoming Andy Kaufman, and it's terrifying, annoying, and he basically actually becomes him. He lives as this guy for the whole of filming, but not just while they're filming. At night when they go home and stuff like that, it's a brilliant documentary, and it's scary. I think
it's not just Andy Kaufman; it's Tony Clifton as well.
Tony
Clifton does Andy Kaufman's alter ego. Yeah.
What's your name?
Bob.
Bob. What's your last name? Up and down in the water? Huh?
Gorski.
Gorski. That Polish?
Yeah.
You trying to do some Polish humor?
Oh, that's...
Shut up!
I saw Yes Man on a date at the cinema. Yes
that's
Man?
quite an ironic one to see.
Danny Wallace.
Danny Wallace,
book, wasn't it? Yeah, and then
the book
obviously turned into a film.
What did you think of Yes Man?
Oh, Yes Man, it's all right. I mean, at the time,
like that. It was kind of like it could have been better than it was type thing.
Yeah.
Can I jump in and just say that Jim Carrey made $20 million. Like he was the first actor in Hollywood to be paid $20 million for a movie. That was for the cable guy off the back of Ace Ventura. Wow. Obviously, he did Batman Forever, everything else like that. But Jim Carrey, for me, and I absolutely love Man on the Moon. I absolutely love Eternal Sunshine. I like Truman Show. Every other film he's done, for me, none of them are more than a 6 out of 10 film. He has done so many clunky films that he's worked with the Farrellys, he's worked with like incredible actors, but the scripts haven't been there very often, I would say. A lot of forgettable films. Like we could go through his films since about 2000.
Yeah.
And there's a handful you're like, oh, actually, that was okay. But there's still something inherently likable about Jim Carrey. Like if Jim Carrey's in something, you're like, oh, I'm quite interested. But he, unfortunately, largely it's been a letdown. Like there's one he did with Ewan McGregor that was called I Love You, Philip Morris, and it doesn't work. So many of his films just don't quite work, and they sort of fall back on that classic Jim Carrey, as we said earlier, rubber face, or a transformation where he's a straight guy, he's a crazy person, or he's just trying something different, and it just gets sold on his name. I just don't think. And like everyone's been saying that the new Sonic films that came out fairly recently, and I as a Sega employee, I have to say they're the greatest films ever made, but that may not be the case. They were like his big comeback. Finally, he's done something great. It's like a kids' film. It's a kids' film based on a 90s computer game.
Yeah. A kid's film that's a decent kid's film, if you're a kid type thing.
That sort of draws on people's nostalgia for 90s computer games. But the reality is, if that's the best that he can do these days, and that's the kind of best thing he's done in the last 10 years, it speaks volumes about his film career.
Well, it's interesting because he he actively took a break, didn't he, from like like being in films. And I think like, he does a lot of art now, and in recent years he's definitely kind of been more open about his depression and ADHD.
Yeah, rightly so.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, like you said, it's reflected in lots of his films, but I guess it's reflected more on the nose. There's a series, I know we're jumping into a series there, called Kidding.
I tried watching that. I got about 2 episodes in and I had to jump out. I just didn't.
Michel Gondry.
It's Michel Gondry, yeah. So it looks and feels incredible. And for me, I agree. It was almost like it was just too far. I like it. I mean, he's amazing in this series. Don't get me wrong. And
he's like a Mr. Rogers.
Really wanted to love this, but yeah, again, like it was just too far, too weird. It was very odd. But
I enjoyed it. I think it's the best thing he's done in a long time. He did obviously Kick-Ass 2, which he then disowned because of the amount of violence in the film.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, and Sonic, there's not been much in the last 10 years, realistically, and like a cameo in Anchorman 2, I think, as well. But Kidding, I thought, was strong. Our lovable man from Superman itself, Frank Langella's in it as well, and he's really good. But I think Jim Carrey's kind of like the glue that brings it together. It's like a Mr. Rogers story, but with a twist. And obviously Tom Hanks recently did a Mr. Rogers feature film as well. But Carrey's actually come out now and said that he's retiring completely, unless there's like a golden, wonderful script, albeit there's definitely going to be a Sonic 3. Spoilers for Sonic 2, but they're definitely doing a third
Of course
one.
it will be.
And I actually spent today watching Sonic 2 in preparation for
I
this.
haven't seen Sonic 2. Yeah.
That's time I'm not going to get back.
But, no.
Yeah, it's fine for what it is. But for me, Jim Carrey just... The idea is often better than the result.
I think that's a fair assessment of his films. Like when you say he's had a career that's let's start with Ace Ventura's his career. Okay,
yeah,
it's a near 30-year career, right? 94, 04, 1, 4, 2, 4. We're talking nearly 30 years. When you look at all those films, look at us. What films we're saying are really good films? We're going Truman Show, Man on the Moon. Yeah, in our opinion, Eternal Sunshine. We're kind of sticking to that late 90s, early noughties period. There's nothing really beyond. There's the odd role here and there. You're like, I liked him in that and I liked him in that. I think Nigel's right. A lot of the films are just very lackluster. I think for a section of his career, he was definitely employed just for his name value, because if you put his name on a poster, guarantee people are gonna he was a bankable star. I think they call it a bankable movie star, and he was. Like when you look at movie stars, he's Marvel films aren't Marvel. The success of Marvel movies isn't because of your Chris Evans or your Robert Downey Jr.'s, as good as they are in those movies. It's because they're Marvel movies. It's simple as that. I would say Jim Carrey's the last of kind of those big actors where you go like, oh, that's that person from a Hollywood movie. Whereas now so many talents are coming through TV, because obviously TV's transformed over the last 20 years. TV has gone from being like, oh yeah, that thing, to quality television. And like you say, Smith, he was in Jim Carrey was in a TV show now.
I think the bizarre thing is, though, like Jim Carrey could take a 10-year break and walk straight back into any film that he wants, whereas someone like of a similar era, Adam Sandler, or even like Ryan Reynolds, someone like that probably couldn't, and just be elevated into like Sonic, like even if it's not a good film, like it's still one of the biggest blockbusters of the last few years, right? I was
going to say, it's funny you bring up Adam Sandler, because I was going to bring him up. I was going to bring up 2 actors who I wanted to make comparisons to, and I just wanted to what you guys thought. So Adam Sandler almost had a very similar trajectory. Obviously not rubber face, but I'm Adam Sandler and I'm the shouty guy. And you do a really initially, film that captivates everyone. It's like, oh shit, with Happy Gilmore, right? And I'm not even going to say Sandler's films overall are on the same level as Carrey's, but Sandler proved with Punch Drunk Love that he can do, like Carrey, that serious role, and you're like, oh shit, this guy can do it. And then Sandler never did a proper serious role again, except for
Uncut Gems as well.
Uncut Gems, Uncut Gems was really fantastic. But for at least Jim Carrey has tried to do more of those serious roles, whereas Adam Sandler's always fallen back on, I'll just make crap and shout a lot and do a funny voice. And so I think the Adam Sandler comparison is an interesting one, but I think an even more interesting one is Robin Williams.
Yes.
When you compare Robin Williams and Jim Carrey's careers, right? Let's look at the humans themselves. Always On, right? It's very rare you see an interview where Jim Carrey's like, yes, I'm happy to be. He's like, oh, and then, you know, and obviously Robin Williams was always on. And obviously Jim Carrey in recent years, you said, he's talked about his depression. That's obviously something that sadly Robin Williams was afflicted with. You know, it kind of, you know, that's why he took his own life and that trajectory, their career is very similar. They start off in really broad comedy, but we saw with Robin Williams in his career, he was able to do like some fantastic serious roles. What's the photograph one I like? 24-hour photo?
1 hour photo, yeah.
1 hour photo. That film is just 1 hour photo.
And then he did we won't get a Robbie Williams one, but Good Will Hunting and you know, like some extraordinary
Good Morning
performances.
Vietnam.
Yeah. Just roles where they could, you know, every once in a while maybe Popeye. Every once in a while show those comedy chops, but primarily
Patch
you're
Adams,
like, oh, this
Bicentennial Man classic.
Do you know what?
Where dreams may come.
Off record, I saw Bicentennial Man for the first time the other week.
That's on record.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Bicentennial Man.
So we're looking for a replacement for James Etok for the podcast. If you want to send in your applications to offradarpod@gmail.com,
sons
please.
of guns.
Or you could just get a robot in to do it.
But I think something about Jim Carrey, right? We've been talking about Jim Carrey. We've been a bit harsh on some of his films. I think he makes films for certain groups of people. Like he had that run where he did like Lemony Snicket, he did The Grinch, he did A Christmas Carol. Bruce Almighty, he did films for certain people. So for a young audience, for comedic audiences, obviously he did the films like Mask, Dumb and Dumber, which for a lot of people they love. For me, didn't hit the mark. Ace Ventura, I know people who could quote the entire film, but for me, for whatever reason, didn't hit the mark. For me, as the films we've talked about, Eternal Sunshine, Man on the Moon, etc., yes, they were for me. So he's always going to be bankable. He's always going to be likable. And I think a lot of his films, even his duds to an extent, are generally enjoyable. They're watchable. They're the kind of films you can put on in the background and at the end you're like, that wasn't great but it was fine. It's not like this was so awful I want to gouge my eyes out type films. He's not doing absolutely terrible films.
Those are Sandler movies.
See them. Because Sandler's got that market wrapped up. But I think it comes across like we're being quite harsh, I think, about some of his films, but I think realistically when he peaks, for me it's unbelievable. But again, he's just making films for certain groups of people, and if you fall into that group, he will entertain you. Like these Sonic films have created a new sort of batch of fans of like Sonic the Hedgehog, of those types of films. It's been sort of labelled as one of the very few sort of computer game crossovers that's worked. I mean, compare it to Super Mario Brothers with Bob Hoskins, and you can kind of see. So, in fairness to sort of Jim Carrey, He's got a good career. Like, you look at the films he's done, maybe not so great. He's made a lot of money. He's made a lot of people laugh.
I was not expecting that. But I was expecting not to expect something, so it doesn't count.
You were talking about of him impersonating people earlier, and there's it's really worth watching where he does a Joe Biden debate with Alec Baldwin. So Carrey plays
SNL, wasn't it?
Yeah, Carrey plays Joe Biden and Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump, and it's so good. It's about 15 minutes long, but it's really well done.
Look, man, I'm a nice guy. But if you give me any more guff tonight, I'll rip your face off like a mad chimp. I'll knock that thing off your head and burn it. Bury it in the pet cemetery where it came from. Stop it, Joe, stop it. God, you can't lose your cool just because this joker's raising little monkey dust. The country's counting on you.
If you had to pick, here's a question for you. What's your favourite Jim Carrey film then? I guess with Nige it's going to be quite obvious because there's only about 3 that he liked, but
it's Eternal Sunshine for me. But Man on the Moon pushes it extraordinarily close. I love Man on the Moon. I love the idea that they had the whole Jerry Lawler skit in real life where I remember on like WWF they're all like those two fought and it was like, oh, Jim Carrey's had a fight with him, exactly the same as what they did in the 70s with Lawler and Andy Kaufman and like Memphis Wrestling. Sort of brought the past to the present, and I just thought that era for him, that film and Eternal Sunshine, they're very close to perfect films.
And best performance, would you say? Same or different?
Maybe I would probably go Man on the Moon, even though
Yeah.
I was about to say, oh, well, he's only like impersonating someone who's real life. Well, acting kind of is that anyway, isn't it? You're obviously impersonating a character. You're trying to be a character. I think he sort of stepped into Kaufman's shoes. And I think even a lot of the people that worked on the film, so like the likes of Danny DeVito and the people that worked on Taxi and like Tony Danza, they kind of said it was like being around Andy Kaufman again. It's like he'd almost come back from the dead. So yeah, for me, I would say that is his top performance.
Fair enough. Etok, do you want a bit more thinking time, or?
Yeah, give me some more thinking time. I'm actually on Wikipedia as we speak, looking at his filmography, going, what are the ones? Yeah, sorry,
okay.
Steve, go on.
Well, yeah, for me, yeah, I mean, I've said it in previous podcasts, but yeah, I mean, my favourite film is without doubt Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. I think that's not necessarily. Yeah, it's more the film, I guess, but he is incredible in that film. Performance, yeah, it's interesting on Man of the Moon. Maybe I should watch that again. I don't remember loving it as much as you're raving about it, Nige. But yeah, I think Truman Show, and I think the reason is because of that time in his career, you know, and what that was in the turning point and how understated it was. I just thought that performance in that film, I mean, you could probably say it about any of those three films in particular, but then again you could say it about a comedic film, because all of those films that we talked about earlier, if you had one of the other guys, like if you had Adam Sandler in those films, they would have been turn-offable. But because Jim Carrey is in that, he always, like, even Liar Liar, you know, it's a good film. It's a 6 out of 10, right? But you know, if you had someone else in that, yeah, it just
2 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. The script is weak and it's really cheesy in 90s, but Jim Carrey elevates that film so much. So that's a credit to him, but also I wish he picked a few better scripts after just going through his career. And I mean, maybe you guys will disagree with us, so please get in touch and let us know if you do.
There is one film we haven't mentioned called The Majestic, which is directed by Frank Darabont, who did like Shawshank, and it was about kind of 1950s blacklisted Hollywood writer, and I think he plays a character who has amnesia. And again, it was a real attempt at a serious role. And I've only ever watched it once. I remember it being okay. Again, not that memorable, but I think, again, he proved he could act. We know that he can do more than the inverted commas rubber face type stuff.
Etok, well, come on.
This is really favourite? Tricky. So performance-wise, I would say, do you know what? I would say it's a film I've only ever seen once, but I think The Truman Show is probably his best film and his best performance. I love Eternal Sunshine. I've probably seen that 2-3 times, but it's a very serious film. So I don't. It's going to sound weird. You know, when you watch a film and it's like, oh, I enjoyed that. I don't think Eternal Sunshine is a film you would say that about. It's like, it's a great film, it's this, that, and this, but it's not like one you come away from going, well, that was a blast, you know. Whereas I think The Truman Show, there's a lot of kind of, I don't know whether it be popcorn entertainment or there's an uplifting sense about it, but I really love his performance in I really love his performance in The Truman Show because, you know, it kind of covers all his bases. You got like silly stuff, serious stuff, you know. I don't know. I think it's a really good overall package of Jim Carrey. So I would say, The Truman Show.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And, well, guys, yeah, what do you think of Jim Carrey? Is there a film that you want us to go away and watch? Recommend?
Mr. Popper's Penguins.
Please don't.
I've changed my mind. Mr. Popper's Penguins is now.
As part of my research, I went on YouTube, and you can like look at certain films from certain scenes rather from certain films. I did it for a few of them because I hadn't seen me, Myself, and Irene in a long time. I hadn't seen Fun with Dick and Jane in a long time. I tried to do it for Mr. Popper's Penguins because I was like, well, I'm not going to miss anything by not watching this film all the way through. I could only watch 1.5 of the scenes before I was like, I'm just done.
I'm done.
No. Again, was made for an audience. I am not part of that audience, and I am glad of that fact.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. So, guys, have you got a good Jim Carrey film that you would like us to watch? Though maybe you don't agree, but yeah, get in touch. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. And yeah, what's your favourite Jim Carrey film? What's his best performance? What film do you really disagree with us that maybe we didn't like as much that you love? Maybe it's The Mask or some of the others. Sorry, I just lost all my...
Mask 2. The Mask.
Lemony Snicket. How about we do our favourite Jim Carrey quotes to wrap up our wonderful Jim Carrey day? I obviously went for "Somebody Stop Me" at the start, which I'm not going to do again.
You have to do it.
Somebody stop me!
Mine is from Liar Lie. The pen is blue. So there you go. That's mine.
I think mine is from The Truman Show, where he says, "Good morning, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." And he says it right at the end of the film, and it's a beautiful moment. And that is how we'll end this podcast.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.